Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. In today's video I'm going to be sharing with you how I get set up and organised for a new academic semester as a PhD student. If you are new here, my name is Ciara and I'm a third year PhD student based in Dublin, Ireland, and I'm studying machine learning. So I'm going to be sharing how I get set up for a new semester. That is because I'm just getting started with the second trimester, I suppose, of my third year of my PhD in university. It really just started up in the last week, so I wanted to share with you all of the things that I do to sort of get organised and get set up and sort of get planning all of my different projects and everything like that for the upcoming semester, trimester, whatever it is you're working with. To mention that I will be touching on all of the different elements that I use within Notion and in my Notion template that I will have linked down below for getting organised and getting planned for this year. However, to mention that a lot of what I'm doing will be taken directly from bullet journaling, which is a paper planning method. So if you are paper planning and bullet journaling or anything like that, you'll definitely be able to take these elements and get them, I suppose, into your own planning system, whatever that is. You definitely don't need to be using Notion or even my Notion template to be doing what I'm going to explain in this video. So the first thing that I do is I will look at my year at a glance page in Notion. Same thing again, if you're doing bullet journaling, you'll probably have a year at a glance, or if you're using some sort of other digital method where you have an overview of your entire calendar, that's pretty much what I'm looking at here. And I will mark in any key dates that are related to the semester ahead. So that will be the sort of main dates that are sort of not flexible and are definite dates. So that will be whenever the classes start back, whenever we have any breaks. And then if there's any classes that you're taking, potentially any assignments or assessments that might be coming up during that time, any annual meetings that might be coming up. So for me, the semester goes from January to May, and I will typically look from January on to about June or so. I'll probably look at around 6 months at a time and really be looking at what can I do in that time. So the first thing will be adding any important dates that are not really flexible. The second thing will be adding in any optional deadlines. So that for me will be conference and journal publication deadlines for submission. So I know I have a number of potential conferences I could apply for during this next 6 months. So I'm going through all of the potential conferences and getting all of the due dates, and if they are multiple due dates, whenever those come up. And I'm also going to mark in whenever the actual conference would be on. And sometimes I'll also mark in the notification date. But typically just looking at the deadline for the conference submission as well as when the conference is going to be. That's something I would definitely recommend doing no matter what year of your PhD you're in. Planning for the next semester, I think when you're looking at publications, it's really good to take into account when conference deadlines especially are coming up, because with journal papers, typically there isn't usually a deadline. You can just sort of submit whenever. I know it depends hugely on the publication, but I find that a lot of the time they are more regular throughout the year, whereas for conferences there's usually just one submission date per year and then one conference per year. So what I typically do is I will look at when the conferences are coming up. So I know, for example, January is a huge time for conference publications, and then sort of April, May will be the second big time for me, and then sort of end of September will be the third main time for me. So those are the 3 times in the whole year where I know I should be trying to think about a conference paper, because there's not much good in me having one in March when there's no conferences coming up. And that will usually give me a big clue as to what I should be working on for these couple of months. So if there's a particular conference coming up, for example, in a certain methodology, so for me it'd be something like recommender systems or case-based reasoning. If I know one of those conferences is coming up, then I probably want to gear my work towards that. And alternatively, if there's a different method, then I'll gear it to something else. Whereas in the months between, when there aren't necessarily any conferences coming up, this means that it's probably a good time to work on either a journal publication or alternatively working on just general thesis writing, literature review stuff, like anything like that in the time in between. So that's typically how I will plan what I'm working on for the academic year. The next thing that I will go and do is add in any personal appointments and things like that. So any birthdays that I want to keep note of, I will put into my calendar. And usually I will also have this linked to a list of present ideas or gift ideas. So this is something that I always find that I'll think about a really good gift for somebody and then later on in the year I'll forget. So I have it linked in Notion to a list of ideas for people's birthdays so that I can just click on the person's birthday and see if I have ideas already there for their birthday. Another thing that I'll do is have a think about what appointments I should really be booking for this semester. So looking at the 6 months, do I need to do a dentist appointment? Do I need to just do a general checkup with my doctor? Is there any other medical or dental appointments that are important to think about and try and get booked in? Are there any personal care appointments that I need to book in, like a haircut or any beauty appointments or anything like that? I'll try and have a think about what needs to go in and when, and then I'll usually try and book those as soon as possible so that they're all just sorted and ready for the semester ahead. And that's just something that I think is so important to make sure that you're taking care of yourself during the next semester. So I've definitely found that over time I can let things like this slip. And so I found that it's really important to do it at the beginning of the semester when everything's pretty chill, get all of these appointments booked, and it means then you don't have to worry about them and you'll actually be more likely to go once you have the appointment booked. Whereas later on in the semester, if I'm feeling really busy, I won't feel like booking that appointment and I definitely won't feel like going. That's just something that I've found really helps me to make sure that I am taking care of myself. The next thing that I will fit in is any holidays. And again, that is a super important thing to do, especially in a PhD program. The amount of times now in second year in particular, because I was actually pretty good at, monitoring and making sure I went on holidays in first year and took breaks. But in second year, we were, in lockdown the whole time. You couldn't really go anywhere. So it just felt like there wasn't much point in booking time off until things were opening up. So I was thinking about like saving up this time off and then getting to do something nice. But I found that so many times, because obviously I have my PhD, I have a business that I run, I have this YouTube channel, I tend to overwork myself a lot. A number of times I've had to take time off due to necessity rather than because I wanted to take time off, you know what I mean? Like I become so overworked that I would become a bit sick and then I'd need to take a few days off, which is just not a fun way to take a holiday. So what I'm doing this semester is looking at any points that might be good to take time off. So that's keeping in mind the key dates that I mentioned for this semester. So if there are any just natural breaks or public holidays, as well as with my business, I teach speech and drama classes each week. So keeping in mind the breaks that we have for then. So trying to find pockets of time that would be good for 3 or 4 days, potentially visiting my dad in Galway or actually a trip abroad. And also keeping in mind if I do have any conferences that I'm looking to target, I'll usually overwork in the period leading up to submitting a paper. It's just sort of a natural thing you sort of end up doing, that you'll work weekends and work late nights, and usually taking a good sort of couple of days to week off afterwards is really important. So that's sort of the best time to try and fit in a little bit of a break, is right after some sort of publication. The next thing that I will do is decide what classes I'm either taking or demonstrating for or TAing for, so teaching assisting for, and then marking in what I need to do for those on a weekly basis or a monthly basis, just to see what it is that I need to be doing. So this is where we're sort of moving from looking at things on the more semester level to the more week level, like on a week-to-week basis. I will typically do some teaching assisting or demonstrating for 2 classes usually per semester. I'm at the point where I don't take any classes myself anymore, and if I was, I probably would only do 1 class of teaching assisting. So I don't take any classes, but if I was, then I would need to sort of mark in any big sort of assessments or assignments, quizzes, anything that's coming up for those. However, because I don't have that, that's not going into my calendar. So the only thing that I really need to think about with the classes that I'm taking is when the actual hours that I need to do for those are, and what do I need to be doing on a weekly basis or on a semester-wide basis. So I'm marking in some key areas for when I have potentially grading or exam invigilation work. And then I'm also just marking sort of a little table for all of the information that I have for the class that I'm demonstrating or TAing for. So just showing an example, what I would usually have would be information for the lecturer, for the teaching assistant. If it's a class that I'm the teaching assistant for, then I will put down the other demonstrators so that I know who I need to contact whenever anything comes up. I'll put down a course description, what is the learning outcomes and what would be the general requirements for me as a demonstrator. Then the information about when the demonstrator hours happen, what time they're at, where they're on, all of that, and whatever prep I need to do. So some classes we will have a dedicated prep meeting, and in other classes we do our own prep, so just putting down what hours I'd need to do. So that's really important for me to keep in mind when I'm planning my week, obviously to keep hours aside for working on that. And then the last thing that I have is any sort of additional work that I might need to do for that class in terms of grading, any emails I might need to do, or any extra things that I imagine will be coming up with that class, which typically isn't a lot. So I've done that for each of the classes that I'm working towards. And the other thing that I will also keep in this sort of same area is any committees or extra things that I have sort of signed up to do during this semester in terms of it could be science communication, it could be being on a committee for equality or something. So I'm on the Equality, Diversity and Inclusion Committee. So I just have a little page where I keep track of any upcoming meetings, which is typically just once a month. So that's just something for me to keep in mind when I'm doing my monthly planning. And then anything that I'm particularly working on. The same thing for my research group. I need to think about what are the things I need to do on a weekly basis. So we do have a weekly meeting. And what would I need to do on a monthly basis? So typically not a lot, but there's usually a need to update if I've published anything or, you know, done anything that I need to tell them about in terms of keeping track of our achievements and all of that. I can keep that in mind when I'm doing my planning for a week or for a month, and sort of just not letting things slip through the cracks with all of these extra responsibilities. Then the last thing is to consider what sort of extra transferable skills I might want to work on for this semester. So I'll show you how my weekly schedule looks in a second, but usually I will try and do sort of 3 or 4 hours of really focused, intense work on my thesis. So doing programming work or doing writing work for a paper, something like that. And then typically I'll spend 2 or 3 hours a day doing other work. So that could be doing work for the classes that I'm demonstrating for, or it could be doing some of the administrative work for some of those committees that I mentioned. Or usually there'll be a couple of days where I don't necessarily have anything like that I'm working on. So what I will do instead is think about a transferable skill that I can work on. And sometimes that will be around YouTube work, but this semester what I want to focus on those days is getting more of a, I suppose, good software engineering approach to how I program, to package up my code and make it readable and reusable for other people. Even though it is me working on my own code and nobody really has to see my code most of the time, it's just important for me to learn the skills to be able to do that if I ever was to work in that environment. So there's a couple of courses that I want to take and a couple of things that I want to do, which I mentioned in my goals. That is the last thing that I will do, is really just think about that. So what will I be fitting into the other days as my transferable skills work? So once I have all of that information, it then comes down to like, what does the weekly schedule look like? I will typically do a time blocked schedule. And so what I'll do is I'll first put in anything that is not flexible. So the hours that I have to do demonstrating for, the hours that I have any meetings, the hours that I have committee work, or anything like that, basically, that I can't change, that's just fixed in the schedule. And then I will try and find larger windows for doing deep work. So trying to find ideally like a 4-hour block that I can just sit and do focused work on thesis writing, all of that stuff. And then after that, what I will do is I will fit in all of my self-care work, you know, morning routines, breaks, anything like that all around. And I do have a more dedicated video talking about how I plan my week, but that's just a very basic overview because I don't want this video to be too long. So that's pretty much it for how I get set up for a new semester and how I get planned and organised for the semester ahead in terms of my PhD work and all of my extra commitments. So I really hope that this video was helpful. If you think I'm missing anything, I would love to hear from you in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching. Thanks to all of my wonderful members, and I will see you all in the next video.